Hi, this is Nels Davis. I'm a product manager, the author of the Secret Product Manager Handbook and the blog of the same name. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Today's video is the continuation of the last video, which was the first 5 of 10 tips on how to be a more effective product manager. So this video is the last 5, the second 5, the remaining 5 of those tips. So I hope you find some of these tips useful. Hope you can apply them in your product management practice. And if you like the video, please click that like button. I welcome you to subscribe to the channel so you learn about new videos as I publish them. And if you have any comments or thoughts, please leave them in the comment section below, because I love to get them and I love to respond to them. I respond to all the comments. Finally, there are some links down below in the comments for all the things that I've mentioned. There's a bunch of blog posts and things that I mentioned in the video. So without any further ado, let's get talking about some tips for product managers. Now, I call them tips, and maybe you will say, well, I'll talk about it in a little bit. There may be a little bit more than just tips. Some of these are pretty meaty little items to think about doing. Now, if you haven't seen the first video, then of course you don't know what's coming. You didn't see the intro that I did about how to make use of these tips and this concept of the 3 things you can do today to start putting these ideas into action. Now, I got this idea originally from a guy named Brian Tracy. He's a pretty well-known sales trainer, public speaker, innovation guy, self-help guru, I guess you'd have to say. He's written a lot of famous books. The first one I read from him was called Goals. It was about how to set and achieve goals. And then he wrote a book that has this great name, Eat That Frog, about getting the most terrible thing on your to-do list done first thing, and then you can make progress the rest of the day. So those are a couple of his books, and he used this technique. He would give you some advice and talk to you about all these theories, and then he would say, here's 3 things you can do today to start putting these ideas into use. And so I thought, well, that's a really great thing to do, and it helps take these ideas from being just sort of abstract into, you can actually do them, and if you don't do them, that's a problem. You need to actually take action on these things. And so I started using the structure in my own blog, and over the course of the years in my blog and the Secret Product Manager Handbook, I've probably got at least 50 of these types of tips in groups of 3, grouped into 3s mostly. I did it on the podcast as well. All the Responsibility, None of the Authority podcast, which at the moment is on hiatus, but we'll be starting up again. But the point is that these are really useful little things, and so I've started putting them into my blog, and I wanted to share a bunch of them and also to talk about how to make use of them. So again, I'm reiterating a little bit of what was in the last video. So if you saw that, you can fast forward for a minute or two. But what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about how to make use of these tips effectively. So let me switch to the PowerPoint window. So these kinds of tips and the kinds of activities that I talk about in these tips are really about continual improvement, about always trying to get better. And if you continually get better over time, even if it's a small amount each time you improve, over time you get a lot better, right? A 1% improvement every day leads to hundreds of percent of improvement over the course of a year or whatever it might be. So the way that I recommend using these tips or thinking about them, and again, they're also pretty meaty because, of course, everything we do in product management is kind of a meaty thing. So most of these are not things where you're going to just paste something up on your cubicle wall and that will fix the problem. These are all about really taking a new approach to a lot of things that you do and then practicing and trying those approaches until you can make them your own, until they start having an impact. So the first thing to do, of course, is to read and understand these tips, or watch the video and listen to me talk about them, and try to come to an understanding of what the goal is there. Then I would recommend trying 1 or 2 at a time. Don't try all 10. Of course, there's only 5 in this video, but combined with the previous video, there's 10, or if you go to the original article. You can't do them all at once, probably, but you can try. You can see what you've achieved. You can do a little more reading and understanding, you can try again and continually improve. Some of them, as I say, are hard. Some of them are a little easier. Some of them are ways of talking about things that sort of change the way you think about things, something I believe in strongly. If you have the right abstract concept about a topic, it actually helps you make use of the topic a lot better. And the first tip today is actually about that, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then one of the things that I also want to mention is this type of continual improvement will tend to differentiate you as a product manager. Not necessarily these specific 10 tips, although I think each of these 10 tips is in itself a very important thing to focus on as a product manager, and will definitely give you better abilities to create great products and take them to market and create value in the market. And so, this idea of continual improvement is just so important that you have to do it all the time to be an effective product manager. And chances are it will differentiate you in the market of product managers if that's something that's important to you. So let's move on. The first tip I'm going to talk about is about Agile. And the headline here, check your Agile. It's just a little joke, really. Not probably that funny as I read it out loud. But the idea is the way that we think about Agile often as technologists is not that valuable to the bottom line of the company, really. So a lot of times we think of Agile as being, we're doing Scrum, so we're Agile, or that we're not going to do that because it's not part of our methodology, because it's not Agile. And when really if you go back to the roots of Agile, and I talk about this multiple times on my blog, there's several articles, but the roots of Agile are really about trying to make a process that delivers value to market faster. And that's what we need to be thinking about as we think about Agile. And so we don't want to think about Agile as, it's Scrum, or it's XP, or it's this methodology, or that, or it's sprints, or whatever. The point of Agile is to get value to market fast. And an Agile approach, or the things that you do in Agile, tend to help you get value to market faster. So, for example, I go into this in a lot more detail in an article on the blog, but for example, if you make a list of all the things that you want to deliver to the market, and then you order that list in terms of what's most valuable, and then you start working on the most valuable thing until you get it done, that's Agile. Well, it's a good way to get value to market, right? Because you're going to work on that thing that's the most valuable, and when you finish it, you can take it to market. Or maybe you decide to do something else. You look at your list again. You make sure it's in the right order. You take into account any changes. You work on the most important thing until you get it done, and then maybe you go to market. And what this means is that at any point in time, your team is always working on the most important thing that they could be in terms of what the market needs. Of course, when I talk about ordering it in terms of value, I mean value to the market, right? Or ability to return value to the company, whatever metric like that you want to use. But the point is, you make a stack rank backlog, you work on the top thing in the backlog until you're done. Now, if you want to have a little bit of predictability, you try to make the things in the backlog relatively small. So maybe you make them things you can complete in 2 weeks, or maybe you make them things you can complete in a few days or in a month, and versus 6 months or a year, right? So you make the things as small as you can, reasonably. Now, realistically, to deliver valuable things to market, things that the market is going to find valuable, often take a long time to build. This is just something we know, right? It may take 6 months to create a feature that's going to move the needle for your customers. And the fact is that delivering 2 weeks worth of that feature probably won't move the needle. But after 2 weeks, you might be able to start going to a customer and say, well, here's the first bit of this. What do you think? Give us your feedback. What did we miss? Things like that. So those are the sorts of things that you can think about in terms of dividing your development into smaller, more predictable increments, being able to get feedback from the market, even if you can't necessarily take the product to market. But the bottom line of this tip is start thinking about Agile in a different way. Think about Agile as, I'm trying to deliver value to the market as fast as I can. What are things that are going to help me do that, and what are things that are going to prevent me from doing that? And a lot of times, as you look at the way Agile is practiced in a lot of companies, there's a lot of preventative steps in the Agile methodology. Oh, you have to do this, or you have to do that, or this has to go on that system, or we have to wait for this other thing. Those are often things that are preventing you from getting value to market. And so they're not really Agile, even if they're in your methodology. Now, there's a lot to be said for things that prevent you from making mistakes, right? And a lot of methodologies are meant to help you not make mistakes or have interlocks and things like that. But those can often also prevent you from making progress. And sometimes, actually a lot of times, those interlocks are overkill. Anyway, the point is, think about Agile from this perspective. And there's a really good reason I get to right at the bottom. If you want to talk to your execs about why you're doing your development the way you are, don't say because Agile is a better way to do development, or we've got a methodology that tells us this is the way. You say, this approach to development is helping us get value to market faster. Suddenly we're moving from a discussion that's about technology, which executives may be interested in but don't care about, to a story about value and time to market, which executives do care about and they're very interested in. And so that's, anyway, my recommendation about Agile. So stop thinking about Agile as a methodology or as your methodology. Think of it as how to get to market faster, and then check to see if your methodology is actually doing that, if your Agile approach is really doing it. And if not, see if you can make it better. Okay. So the next topic is, again, a big topic. And again, I've got a lot of blog posts about this, so that's how I know this. We need to be able to ask better questions as product managers and as founders a lot of times. So, the reality is that most product companies fail, if they fail, because the founders or the product managers didn't ask good questions at the outset about the problems that the market has. Because, as I've said a lot of times, what a company is supposed to do is create a customer. And what does a customer need? A customer needs a solution to a problem that's bad enough that they'll pay for the solution, right? So they have to pay for the solution for us to be successful. Our solution has to work for them. Otherwise, they're not going to help us sell to other customers. And so we have to make sure we really find good problems out there. And they can't just be problems that we think sound good. Unfortunately, one of the great things about being a product manager is that, and working in high tech in general, we're working with a ton of smart people who have really great ideas, but we don't know if those ideas are worth doing until we go out and validate them with customers. And in fact, a lot of times the ideas that we have about what are actual problems are not the ideas that our customers have about what are actual problems. So we have to learn how to ask questions that elicit from customers, from prospects, from anybody who might become a customer, what their actual problems are, what is wrong with the solutions that they currently have for those problems, if any, whether they're willing to pay for those solutions. We have to learn all three of those things, right? What the problem is, what's wrong with the current solutions to the problem, and whether they're willing to pay for the solution before it's worth it for us to even think about building something. So my recommendation, the tip here, is really to develop that set of questions that helps you do that for your particular market. And then practice those and continually improve them as you go out and use them in the market. Of course, implicitly, there's this whole point here that I didn't put on the slide, which is to go out and talk to the market using your questions. Now, the goal of your questions is to stay in what we call problem space. There's a great term. As technologists, we love solution space, which is where all the fun stuff is. It's where the gadgets and the gear and the technology all is. But in order to find a problem effectively, you have to not get in solution space, and you have to keep both yourself and your customer that you're talking to in problem space. And the way to do that is with open-ended questions that are about the problems that they suffer from, and the ways that they tried to solve those problems, and the ways that their attempts to solve those problems failed, and about how they've tried to go find better solutions, and about whether this is the most important problem for them or whether there's other problems that are more important that they're more likely to spend their money on. And all of these different things, these are the types of things that we need to know the answers to if we want to create a solution that's going to be successful in the market. So tip number 7, ask better questions, create a set of questions for doing this kind of discovery in your market, practice it, and go out, of course, and use it. Now, tip number 8 is really about the other end, and both tip 8 and 9 are really about the other end of the process for us. So product management, as you recall, it's about finding market problems, about creating solutions to those problems that are better than the alternatives, and then taking those solutions to market, meaning selling them or helping the market understand that you have a solution and that your solution is a better alternative. So, the best salespeople, the most successful salespeople, show how your solution, your product, solves the customer's specific problem, right? And so that means that they have to discover the customer's problems. Now, if we're doing a good job of marketing is generating leads that are likely to have the problem, the general problem that we solve. Now, the question is, what are the specifics of that problem? You know the famous saying that happy families are all happy in the same way, but unhappy families are all unhappy in different ways. I kind of botched that, but there's a saying about that. And that's also true of people's problems, of customers' problems. Now, the problems may all be similar, but each customer has their own perception of their own problem. And even if it turns out from our perspective that the problem is the same as other prospects, from their perspective, they're unique. And so we want to understand that. We want to understand not only what the problem is, but how they feel it's unique and what any differences might be, so that when we start to pitch how our solution is going to help them, that we can say, when we've had customers that had this specific thing going wrong, like you, here's what we do, or here's how they use our solution to solve that problem. So if you only give your salespeople information about the features in your product, it's very difficult for them to talk about how the product actually solves problems. So what you really need is to provide 4 key pieces of information. Now again, it's not really a tip. This is a whole way of thinking about things. The tip is to get started doing it. And to get started delivering the 4 pieces of information that sales really needs from the product organization in order to be effective at showing how your solution solves their prospects' problems. So the 4 components are the value proposition, the qualifying questions to figure out if this is really if this prospect really needs our product, needs our solution, and to discover the details of what their issues are, right? So we can figure out how best to position our product. We need to give them the ability to handle objections and handle questions about competitors and to deposition competitors. And then we also need to give them a lot of stories from successful customers. Now, if they're out there selling, they're getting some stories as they do this, but there's certain types of stories that we need to gather just as a product organization in general from our successful customers that we can then help the salespeople understand how these stories apply to specific situations that might come up in a sales situation. So, for example, if we have a prospect who has a competitive objection about some particular feature that a competitor has, then we should be able to have a story, and I'm going to talk about this in tip 9 as well. We should have a story that says how we had a customer who had the same concern, they got our solution, and they found out, that they didn't miss that feature, or that they got a better solution with our product because of a different feature that was better than the feature that they're worried about. Something like that. Those are the types of things you want to be able to provide for sales. Now, can you provide an answer to every single one of those? Often you can't. But can you get started by giving them some? Yes, you can. And that's really the tip. It's to get started on giving the sales organization more information that will help them win deals that's not just lists of features. Now, you may already be doing this. A lot of product management organizations do this already. But you'd be surprised at how many do not. Where there is no document about here's how to handle these common objections. No document of here's some great customer stories to use in different situations. No document that says here's the questions to ask to make sure this is an ideal prospect for us. Those are all really valuable things to have, and a lot of organizations don't have them. And where does all the knowledge for that type of information come from? Well, it comes from us, the product managers, because we're the people that know who the prospects are, because we know who has the problem. We know the characteristics of that market. We know what our solution is good for and what it's bad for. We know about what its competitive differentiators are and where it falls down. So we are the people that know all the stuff that needs to go in that information that goes with sales. Now, if you're lucky, you have a good product marketing person who can help you articulate that, who can write it down for you, who can beautify it. But the knowledge is coming from you. And if you're not providing that knowledge, then very likely no one is. And that means your salespeople are not going to be as successful as you would like them to be. So I do a lot of talking about helping salespeople get more effective because, my goal with my product is not to create a product, is not to create a beautiful product. My goal with my product is to create a lot of really successful customers who pay us enough money for me to continue to have my job. That's my goal. And so obviously a key part of that is that the sales can be successful. And there's all kinds of challenges that they have. And the more that I can help them be successful and get across or through those challenges, the better. My ultimate goal is I don't want my product to be the type of product that only a superstar salesperson can sell. I want any good salesperson who has basic skills and who does the work to be able to sell my product. If they can make the call, and if they can, ask the qualifying questions, and if they can answer the competitive objections effectively, then they're much more likely to be successful than if I give them the right information for all those things, than if they just have to make it up themselves. And so that's my goal, is for, I expect a certain level of things from salespeople, right? I expect them to make that call. I expect them to make a lot of calls every day. I expect them to present themselves. I expect them to make use of what I present them and make it very personable and tie it to what the customer's needs are and things like that. But I have to give them the information for them to be able to do that. So tip 9 is another one of these pieces of information in that sales world. And that is really about competitive objections. And it really ties into the previous tip as well. So I talked about objection handling and competitive information. This is specifically about competitive objection handling. And I wrote a specific blog post about this because it's one of the harder things, at least for me, I find this difficult to figure out how to do a competitive, what's often called a hit sheet. And so one of the things that I thought would be interesting is to take it up a level. So it's not exactly a hit sheet in my conception. Hit sheets are often, we have this feature, they don't have that feature, things like that. I'm much more interested in understanding how my customers were successful when they weren't successful with a competitor's product, for example. So sometimes that happens. You have a customer that tried the competitor, they didn't like it, and they moved to us. Let's tell that story. Let's tell that story about why the competitor didn't work and why we did. Now, sometimes it's about a feature. Your competitor has feature X and you don't have it. And so then you have to dance around. But what I want to be able to do is have a story that says, oh, you know what? We had a prospect that worried about that. They bought our solution anyway. And here's how that came out. It came out really successfully for that customer. And I want to be able to tell that story. And I want the salespeople to be able to tell that story in response to that objection, as opposed to something like tap dancing about saying, well, feature X is not that important really. And but if I can tell that as part of a story, that's going to be much more effective. And so I guess when I talk about the idea of creating a competitive objection guide, what I'm really talking about is making sure to go out and find the stories from your customers about why they chose you over a competitor. And in particular, if they've had experience with competitors, why your solution is superior to the competitors from their perspective, even though it's missing some particular features. So that's what I talk about that's what I mean when I talk about creating a competitive objection guide. So finding those stories, really valuable. And now let's talk about item 10. And this is another big one. It's related to the idea that I talked about with Agile. So Agile was quite a long conversation, and this is related to that. Recalling Agile is meant to be a way to deliver value to market faster, right? And if your Agile methodology isn't doing that, then you need to rethink it, and it's probably not as agile as you think. And that's all it means. And if you think about, is that scrum fall or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's got some waterfall components in it. If the waterfall components are helping you get value to market faster, and that can sometimes happen because it turns out that you do need to do some planning ahead of time before you launch on a new initiative. And that planning is a very waterfallish activity. Now, it may be that your scrum fall is actually inhibiting you. And so maybe the planning is taking too long. Maybe you need to actually start getting some experiments out. Well, that's a way to think about how you might want to change your process if it's not working to help you get value to market. Now, all of our processes were designed for a reason, right? There's some reason behind whatever process you might have implemented. In particular, if it was implemented at least half consciously, right? Some companies sort of end up with a de facto process, and that often was not decided on specifically. But even that typically has changed and morphed over time in response to things that happen that you want to either prevent or that you want to encourage. Now, the problem is that over time, as your customer base changes, as your company size changes, as your product offering changes, your target market, all those things, maybe even your development tech stack, as those things change, your old processes are probably actually starting to get in your way rather than being valuable. And so it's very important to continually be looking at your process to see, is it helping you deliver value to market or is it hindering you? And so the tip here is to keep your eye out on your process and figure out if there's one change you can make today or right soon, or a change that you can push on, because sometimes if you're in a big organization, it's hard to make a change unilaterally. Is there some change you can make today or very soon, or that you can start pushing today, that will help make your process more effective at the ultimate goal, which is getting your product to market faster and with higher value? And so, again, there's an article about this on the blog. I thought it was a pretty interesting topic to talk about, and I recommend taking a look at that. Excuse me, I had to cough. All of these tips are again in a blog post, and the blog post itself links to other blog posts, so you can get more information on all of those. If you have any questions or comments about the things that I mentioned today, please let me know. Put something in the comments. If you like the video, please be sure to subscribe, to like, to share with your friends. There are additional resources in the post below, and if you would leave a comment, I would love that. I love getting comments on these. I love to hear whether these tips are useful, whether they help you think better, whether they make you think, and whether you can make use of them going forward and things like that. So that's the end of the talk for today, the end of the talk. It's like a lecture. It is like a lecture because I'm here, you guys are out there, wherever you are, and it is a little bit like a lecture. So I apologize for that. Love to have it be more of a conversation as we go forward. But anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something or found something that was valuable. And without any further ado, that's going to be it for today.